Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate Air India for organizing this special evening. And the previous insights from Mr. Rajesh, Mr. Anand, and Mr. Tripathi been very impressive. The life for few of us has changed over between 90s, from 80s to 90s, 90s to 2000s, and now. There's been a paradigm shift in the way we conduct our life. So if you look at the 70s and 80s, for any information which was very specific in life, we would look for and refer an encyclopedia. But today, probably we go to a Wikipedia. So life has truly changed. Besides that, if we were to look at calling somebody in 70s or 80s, we would typically go to a pay phone. And today, we use an iPhone. So life has truly changed. So what it means is that life has been transforming. And with the transformation comes several challenges, especially for marketeers, because most of the purchases that we make are perception-based. Now, the latest controversy about Maggie. Maggie's been the choice of many kids who grown to be adults, maybe some of them who consumed in our teens. Now, perceptions drive consumption. Perceptions drive market shares. So here's a small story of what a perception can do to a brand. So long ago, there was this United States Army which was planned to make a purchase of aircrafts, military aircrafts specifically, and they invited the best of the manufacturers. So in came Boeing, then Douglas and Martin. And there was a display which was to be conducted. And then they found that Boeing's got an amazing animal over there called Model 299. And it was so impressive that psychologically it trounced Martin and Douglas. So psychologically, it had won over the hearts and minds of the buyers in the army. Now, why was it so? It is 5 times the capacity. It could carry 5 times the capacity that the US Army asked for. It could fly at twice the speed that they asked for, and probably twice the distance that they asked for. It's so impressive that one of the journalists called it a flying fortress. Now again, gentlemen and ladies, perception. Now, the competition was just a mere formality. As all of us would know, the press had written that it's a flying fortress, most suitable for the US Army. Well, could you guess what would happen next? The competition was on. They said, all right, we'll take a test flight of this animal called 299. So the flight took off. It lifted off smoothly, moved sharply, went on to 300 feet, and then tilted right and crashed. It's all over. Now, can you imagine a flying fortress crashing down? Along with the flying fortress went down one of the chief pilots, who was an ace, who was the very senior chief pilot in the US Army. Now, they investigated. They said, hey, how can this happen? How can this aircraft from Boeing crash? And then they found out that it is a pilot error. There was not a mechanical error. It was a pilot error. Now, what it says is very simple. The perception was that the product is good, but then it crashed. So eventually they found out that the pilot error occurred because of 3 or 4 reasons. Number one, the flight the aircraft was very large, number one. It was 103 feet. The wingspan was 103 feet, 4 engines. So the pilot had to, on an average, manage, roughly around 4 engines. And he had to manage the fuel mix. He had a retractable landing gear. He had the speed propellers, many things to manage. They said it was too much of a plane for one person to fly. While it was a great product, the perception built was that it's too much of an aircraft for a simple man to buy or a simple man to fly. Now, gentlemen, what would the US government do? Now, since the aircraft crashed, the selection process finally decided for Douglas. And Boeing was given me. Boeing said, all right, we don't buy from Boeing, we buy from Douglas. So Boeing was puzzled. They said, listen, we've got one of the best animals there, double the speed, double the distance, and it can carry 5 times the capacity. Why isn't these guys buying us, right? So they went back to the drawing board and found out what led to the pilot error. And they found out that the pilot didn't know what to do, because at some point in time, the pilot had forgotten to release the new locking mechanism that was built into the aircraft. So what they did is they actually pulled out a checklist of what a pilot should do to deal with this animal called the flying fortress. And eventually what happened is they said, okay, we'll still try this product, and bought a couple of them. And then eventually what happened is they flew this aircraft for roughly around 8 million miles without an error with the checklist. So once the checklist was made and the pilot was trained, the same aircraft was flown for 1.8 million miles. Now, why are we talking about all this is because this is a product which failed. And it's very important to understand that a good product fails, then you have a lot to explain. For example, Nestle, right? For example, the Maggi noodles. I mean, there's certain perception about the brand. Marketeers have a role to play. So now what happened to this aircraft is very interesting. After 1.8 million miles, without even one single accident, US Army placed, can you guess the number of planes they ordered for this? 13,000 aircrafts were ordered. So gentlemen, the lesson from here is very simple. A guidebook did the mantra. The guidebook did the mantra. So all that we got to do is when we have a good product, we ought to find out the small weaknesses inherent within it. Here was a guidebook, a checklist that was required, that's all, to make sure that your product is saleable and the perceptions are changed. Now, these are the challenges for any marketer today to either sell a product or service. Now, let's take one more example. We all know that marketing is, can any of us guess how old is marketing worldwide? How old is marketing? 1,000 years, 500 years, 50 years? Marketing is around 110 to 115 years old. And social media marketing or social marketing is around 44 years old. Now, let's understand how marketing actually helps, how innovation actually helps. Here's one more example. How a human mind can transform and think differently. So it's so important for marketers to think and innovate, because how do you actually take your product to the market? How do you make sure that you address the pain points of the consumers? Very critical in marketing. It's not about selling a product. Nobody sells products today. Somebody solves a problem, right? Nike never says that I sell shoes. Does Nike say that they sell shoes? They never say that. Nike says I give you comfort, maybe, right? I make sure I give you the agility. So here was a case in one of the discotheques. The discotheque was facing a challenge. The challenge was that after 11 p.m., the police would come and say, hey, listen, you got to actually close down your discotheque and cannot go on anymore. So the owner asked him a question as to what is the problem. He says, there's too much noise in your discotheque. I can't let your pub operate. So he said, what's the solution? He said, no, listen, make sure there's no noise. He said, how can you have no noise? So he said, okay, I'll give 15 days. In 15 days, if you guys don't adhere to what I tell you, you guys don't operate beyond 11 p.m. So the owner said he has two choices. Either he stopped the business or he actually do what the cop told him. He chose the second option. And so after 20 days, there was no noise around this pub. The police cop got very curious. The team was doing a round, and they went there. And they saw there are a lot of lights in, but there's no noise. So he stepped inside, and they saw a lot of people, basically dancing. So there was no noise. So he wondered what's happening there. And so owner said, come in, I'll tell you what's happening. So he said, you just put this in, the earplugs. And then the guy said, there's a lot of music that's blowing in his ears. I said, what's this? He said, I'm using a Bluetooth technology. I said, what does this technology do to you? He says, listen, this technology transfers to the ear of the consumer wirelessly. Now, he has adopted technology innovatively. You can call it marketing. Somebody sold to him the idea that you can still have music in the ear. You don't need it in the room. And the discotheque operates even today with Bluetooth technology. Gentlemen, why are we talking about this? It's very important to know that there are innovations in terms of marketing. One is crowdsourcing, gearless cars, laser keyboards. There are a lot of innovations. Today you talk about, Mr. Rajesh talked about the other thing, which is, you're talking about technology where email is going to be dead very soon. Why not have an instant messaging? So the world is going to change. Marketers' approaches to positioning products also should change. Now, as we know, as we speak today, there are many challenges to all of us. The landscape is evolving. No more are we talking about consumers who are offline. We also have consumers who are online. We have close to around 3.17 billion internet users globally. We have 2.2 billion active social users globally, and close to 3.7 mobile users globally. So CMOs today are quite challenged in terms of addressing the changing landscape, and that poses a lot of complexity in terms of the way you deal with offline customers as well as online customers. The current generation, which is born after 82, certainly has adopted technology in a big way, and we have a large role to play as we go along in future times to come. So having said that, I think the most important, or 4 or 5 important things that a CMO should always address is, what is that product that we bring into the market addresses? Number one, it should address the pain points of a consumer. I don't think anybody buys a product. Somebody adopts a product which probably eliminates the pain point. Gearless cars address the pain point of changing gears. Somebody's not comfortable changing gears, so gearless cars come in there and play a very important role. For example, on-time delivery. Today we gotten used to faster delivery. Mr. Rajesh talked about instant delivery. Anything that you order today has got to be very quick. Pizzas have got to be delivered within half an hour, right, of time. So speed of delivery is another thing that we're talking about. Today we gotten into actually intolerance movement. You don't like a website to be actually loading anything beyond 2 seconds. So as we go along, I think there'll be many challenges for CMOs to go and address over the next decade or so. But I think if we can keep our customers happy, address their pain points, we've done a job. It's not about selling a product, but it's about addressing their pain points is what CMOs and the marketing organization should be addressing. Gentlemen, with that note, I would like to thank the channel community for bringing most of the organizations who actually manufacture these products and present to a community which is a lot out there in Tier 3 and Tier 4 cities, and make sure the technology percolates down while dealing with the heterogeneous and demanding needs of the consumers out there. So thank you very much, and wish you all a great evening today and a grand success ahead.